Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ here. Welcome to the program. Now on tonight's headlines.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous...
Donald Trump acknowledges his presidency is ending and promises a smooth transition to Joe Biden in the wake of a mob attack by his supporters on the U.S. Capitol, now known to have left 5 people dead.
A radical cleric linked to the Bali nightclub bombings is freed from prison, stirring grief and anger among victims nearly 2 decades after more than 200 people, mostly foreign tourists, were killed in Indonesia's worst terror attack.
China locks down millions of people in an effort to fight a fresh outbreak of coronavirus, as the U.S. reports a record number of deaths.
And the Australian city of Brisbane has called a snap 3-day lockdown after a worker at a quarantine hotel contracted the highly infectious UK strain of COVID-19.
If we do not do this now, it could end up being a 30-day lockdown.
Donald Trump acknowledged his presidency was ending, and he promised a smooth transition to Joe Biden in the wake of a mob attack by his supporters on the U.S. Capitol, now known to have left 5 people dead, after 2 of his cabinet secretaries quit in protest following Wednesday's mayhem. An unusually tame Trump condemned rioters who rampaged in his name through a congressional session that certified Mr. Joe Biden's victory, although he did not go so far as to congratulate or even say the name of his successor. Take a look.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high, but now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. 2020 has been a challenging time for our people. A menacing pandemic has upended the lives of our citizens, isolated millions in their homes, damaged our economy, and claimed countless lives. Defeating this pandemic and rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. To the citizens of our country, serving as your president has been the honor of my lifetime. And to all of my wonderful supporters, I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Now, President Trump's turnaround came as the 2 top Democrats in Congress urged his immediate removal, fearing damage he can still inflict in his less than 2 weeks left in the world's most powerful job. Two members of Donald Trump's cabinet resigned on Thursday with days left in the administration in protest over the storming of the Capitol by a mob of the president's supporters. The Education Secretary and Transportation Secretary, the only two women in Trump's inner cabinet, both said they could no longer remain in office after the violent rampage on a ceremonial session of Congress that certified President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Biden, who won 7 million votes more than Trump in the November 3 election, as well as a decisive edge in the vital state-by-state electoral college, declined to address demands for Trump's removal, but accused him of an all-out assault on the institutions of the democracy.
Yesterday, in my view, one of the darkest days in the history of our nation. An unprecedented assault on our democracy. An assault literally on the citadel of liberty in the United States Capitol itself. An assault on the rule of law. No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol. We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
I joined the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this president by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and the Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment. When you have the 25th Amendment invoked, that would be calling upon the Vice President, as we hope to do, to take the lead and with a majority of the Cabinet to be able to unseat the President of the United States. A very dangerous person who should not continue in office. This is urgent. This is emergency of the highest magnitude.
As to the 25th Amendment being invoked, I do not believe that's appropriate at this point. I'm looking for a peaceful transfer of power. I'm looking for the next 14 days to reset, and we will hand off power in a traditional sense by it being a peaceful transfer. I talked to Mark Meadows this morning. The transition is going well. It is fully in place. The president's frustrated. He thought he was cheated. Nobody's ever going to convince him that he wasn't. But this idea of asking the vice president to use his powers to send back electors that were certified doesn't exist in the Constitution. I think his president has been consequential from a conservative point of view. It's been an amazing 4 years in terms of judges, securing the border, a vaccine in record time, deregulating the economy, cutting taxes, historic Mideast peace agreements, the destruction of the caliphate, on and on and on, was tarnished by yesterday. When it comes to accountability, the president needs to understand that his actions were the problem, not the solution. That the rally yesterday was unseemly, it got out of hand, and a good friend of mine, Rudy Giuliani, did not help. I said on the floor of the Senate, I cast my vote accordingly, that Joe Biden is the legitimate president-elect of the United States.
Adopted in 1967, the 25th Amendment lays out the provisions for a transfer of power from a U.S. president who dies, resigns, is removed from office, or for other reasons is unable to fulfill his or her duties. It has been invoked on several occasions, notably by Richard Nixon when he resigned in 1974, and for presidents undergoing a surgical procedure so that power could be shifted temporarily to the vice president. Vice President H.W. Bush was was made acting president for about 8 hours while President Reagan was in surgery. President George W. Bush temporarily transferred power to Vice President Dick Cheney in June of 2002 and in July 2007 when he underwent routine colonoscopies under anesthesia. In October of last year, there was talk of Trump possibly invoking the amendment when he became ill with COVID-19, but in the end, he took no such action.
Meanwhile, a U.S. Capitol police officer has died of injuries sustained during clashes with a mob of President Donald Trump supporters who overran a session of Congress, police said late Thursday. It was the first law enforcement death stemming from the violence at the Capitol on Wednesday, which saw flag-waving crowds overwhelm police and break into the legislature. 4 protesters died, including a woman who was shot by police. 3 other deaths were reported on the Capitol grounds, but the circumstances remained unclear. Officer Brian Sicknick, a 12-year veteran of the force, was responding to the riots on Wednesday, January 6, at the U.S. Capitol and was injured while physically engaging with protesters, Capitol Police said in a statement. The Capitol Police Chief, Stephen Sund, resigned on Thursday afternoon in the wake of the riots. Several prominent people had called for him to step down, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the head of the police union. Capitol Police Union Chairman Gus Papathanassiou said in a statement Thursday that officers were frustrated and demoralized by the lack of leadership. Law enforcement said more than 50 Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police officers suffered injuries in the rioting, and several USCP officers have been hospitalized with serious injuries.
Now, it is very unlikely that the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which provides for the removal of a sitting president who is incapacitated, will be invoked before Donald Trump leaves office on January 20. That is according to Dr. Barbara Perry, Director of Presidential Studies at the University of Virginia's Miller Center. However, she said there could be a case made that Donald Trump has crossed the line into a mental, at least aberration, if not illness. Let's listen in.
And the U.S. Congress passed and the states ratified this 25th Amendment to allow for a removal of a president who was incapacitated either by his own invocation, realizing he might be physically incapable, mental incapacity, if that was necessary, through a majority of his cabinet and the vice president voting to remove him, or a committee of Congress voting to remove him. It was added to the U.S. Constitution in the mid-1960s as a result of a severe heart attack that President Dwight Eisenhower suffered in 1955, and it confined him to a hospital room and bed in Denver, Colorado. That's where he suffered the heart attack while visiting family, and he was unable to get back to Washington for 7 weeks. And so I think it's very unlikely in this just 13 days we have left in the Trump presidency that it would be invoked. But I also never had anticipated that a mob of thousands of terrorists, domestic terrorists, would break into the inner sanctum of the Congress as they did yesterday. So I think just on yesterday alone, there could be a case made that Donald Trump has crossed the line into a mental, at least aberration, if not illness. In terms of yesterday's actions by the mob, the domestic terrorists in the United States, unprecedented. Our Capitol was overtaken and burned along with the White House by the British in what is called the War of 1812. That happened in 1814 when the British overtook Washington, D.C., causing the president and the first lady then, James Madison, Dolly Madison, to flee for their lives from the White House. But we've never had a domestic mob take over the Capitol at a time when the Congress was attempting to confirm the recent presidential election.
U.S. President Mike Pence reads a statement officializing Joe Biden's victory in the presidential election after a joint session of Congress certified the Electoral College votes. The certification process had been interrupted when a mob of Donald Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. Watch this.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes. The whole number of electors appointed to vote for Vice President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, a majority is 270. The votes for Vice President of the United States are as follows. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 306 votes. Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana has received 232 votes. The announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected President and Vice President of the United States, each for the term beginning on the 20th day of January, 2021, and shall be entered together with the list of the votes on the journals of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
They're going to go home. Y'all are going to go home.
A radical cleric linked to the Bali nightclub bombings was freed from prison today, stirring grief and anger among victims. Nearly 2 decades after more than 200 people, mostly foreign tourists, were killed in Indonesia's worst terror attack. Abu Bakar Bashir, 82 years old, is seen as the spiritual leader of Islamist terror network Jemaah Islamiyah, which was responsible for the massive blast that ripped through a pair of packed bars in October of 2002. The firebrand preacher was released after completing an unrelated jail term for helping fund militant training. But he has long been suspected of involvement in the horrific Holiday Island bombings, which came just a year after the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. Sentenced to 15 years in 2011, his term was later cut due to sentencing reductions handed to most prisoners in Indonesia. Now, news of Bashir's release brought back the horror of the memories of Jan Lashinsky, 51. He was drinking with friends at the Sari Club before flying back to Australia. Hours later, 5 of his friends were among the hundreds killed as a string of huge bombs ripped through the district. Take a look.
And I know one thing that he will do. He will crave the media attention that he will get on Friday. He will have a huge gathering. He will put his hand up and will start waving with a big smile on his face. And that's what's going to hurt every person that was impacted by all the terror attacks in Bali. That's what's going to hurt the most. It was awful at the time, knowing that they were gone. Horrible. It hurts me a lot. I wanted to see justice be done. So my journey of healing was returning back to Bali, as awful as it was, seeing that dreadful bomb sites. It was horrible. I thought this was going to be ultimate closure for me, because I thought, 15 years, we're not going to see him walk out of jail. And now we're going to see him walk out of jail, and I'm thinking, because not just the horror of the memories come back, but number 2, it's the fear factor. He's going to walk out with a hero's welcome. And the first thing he's going to do, he's not going to go home. He's going to go to a mosque and start preaching all his religious vitriol of hate. I mean, I think Scott Morrison should be proactive and pick up the phone call and to say, look, okay, this guy's served his sentence, but make sure he is watched. Make sure he doesn't have access to the tools of the trade. These tools of the trade are simply a microphone, a megaphone, a mosque or a church, and practicing his hate speeches. In their own way suffering. There were still people, even next week, having operations for their burns. People are still suffering. A lot of people are going through their hurt. Every year we hate October because it brings back those painful memories, going to reunions.
Bashir's lawyers had appealed for his release, citing his age and risk of contracting COVID-19 in the Southeast Asian nation's notoriously overcrowded prison system. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison described Bashir's release as gut-wrenching. The Bali bombings prompted Jakarta to strengthen cooperation with the U.S. and Australia on counter-terrorism. Al-Qaeda-linked JI, founded by exiled Indonesian militants in neighboring Malaysia in the 1980s, was largely dismantled by security forces after the attacks in 2002 and a 2005 bombing on the Holiday Island.
In other news, a South Korean court on Friday ordered the Japanese government to pay compensation to 12 World War II sex slaves or their families in an unprecedented ruling that prompted an immediate denunciation by Tokyo. The Seoul Central District Court ruled that Japan should pay the victims 100 million won or $91,000 each. Watch this.
나치 독일군들의 그 인권 탄압보다 더해서만 더했지 덜하지 않는 것이 바로 일본군 위안부 피해 할머니들에 대한 인권 탄압이라고 생각했기 때문에
할머님들은 사실은 뭐 배상에 크게 이렇게 막 의미를 두진 않으세요. 왜냐면은 뭐 본인 살 날이 얼마 남지 않았다 배상보다는 이제 사죄랑 그 일본 정부가 이 문제를 이제 계속해서 자국민들한테 알려서 이런 전쟁범죄가 없길 바라는 마음이 더 크시지 이거를 뭐 돈
It is the first civilian legal case in South Korea against Tokyo by wartime sex slaves for Japanese troops who were euphemistically labeled comfort women. The ruling comes despite a 1965 treaty between Seoul and Tokyo, which declared claims between them and their nationals had been settled. Imperial Japan was responsible for the comfort women system, the court said in its verdict. The plaintiffs, who were in their late teens or early 20s, were subjected to repeated sexual exploitation, it said. It amounted to an illegal act against humanity, and the defendant has an obligation to compensate the victims for their mental suffering. Tokyo and Seoul are both major U.S. allies, democracies and market economies, but their deepening rift will present incoming U.S. President Joe Biden with an immediate foreign policy headache as he seeks to build a common front on China and nuclear-armed North Korea. Ties between the neighbors are strained by Japan's early 20th century colonial rule over Korea, which is still bitterly resented on the peninsula and have plunged to their worst in years under South Korea's center-left President Moon Jae-in.
China warned the United States would pay a heavy price if its United Nations Ambassador Kelly Craft made good on plans to travel to Taiwan next week. Craft's January 13 to 15th visit will come just a week before the inauguration of U.S. President-elect Joe Biden and creates a fresh diplomatic headache for the incoming administration. She's scheduled to speak at the Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs on January 14 on Taiwan's impressive contributions to the global community and the importance of Taiwan's meaningful and expanded participation in international organizations, according to the statement. Taiwanese presidential spokesman Xavier Chang welcomed the visit, saying it symbolizes the firm friendship between Taiwan and the U.S. Democratic and self-ruled Taiwan lives under the constant threat of invasion by China, which views the island as its own territory and has vowed to seize it one day by force if necessary. Beijing opposes any diplomatic recognition of Taiwan and has pushed to keep it isolated on the world stage. Outgoing U.S. President Trump has sent multiple senior officials to Taipei over the last year as he clashed with China on a host of issues such as trade, security, and human rights.
In other news, Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong gets his first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine on Friday, saying it is painless, effective, and important, and encourages Singaporeans to take the voluntary jab. Watch this.
So I took the opportunity to have my own jab this morning, and now I'm done. 30 minutes, waited, nothing happened, and I've got my card. and the appointment to come back in 3 weeks' time. It's painless, it's effective, and it's important. And I hope that Singaporeans will take it up as we roll it out. We've got ample vaccines coming in. We ordered them early. We have enough for everybody in Singapore, all the residents, all the citizens, and even the non-citizens who are staying here. And we're going to roll this out progressively over the next few months, hopefully be done by third quarter of the year, latest end of the year.
Singapore was among the first Asian nations to roll out inoculations, launching its vaccination campaign last week, starting with staff from the National Center for Infectious Diseases. The city-state, which has suffered a mild outbreak, became the first country in Asia to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine earlier this month. The city-state has also signed advance purchase agreements with Moderna and Sinovac and is in discussion with other pharmaceutical companies. After healthcare workers, the city-state will vaccinate the elderly and then the rest of the population. The government expects to have enough vaccines for all 5.7 million people in the city by the third quarter of this year, with the voluntary vaccine free for all Singaporeans and long-term residents.
We'll take a short break. Eagle News will be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Canreeve Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Osaka and two other Western Japan prefectures decided to jointly request the central government to expand the state of emergency to their areas as coronavirus infections continue to rise. Kyoto and Hyogo prefectures will join Osaka in making the request to Yasutoshi Nishimura, minister in charge of the government's response to the novel coronavirus, during an online meeting as early as Saturday, according to Osaka Governor Hirofumi Yoshimura. Japan's government declared a month-long coronavirus state of emergency in the greater Tokyo area on Thursday as the capital reported another record surge in daily infections. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga made a special appeal to young people to abide by the requests. He said that more than half of recent new infections in greater Tokyo were among the under-30s. Japanese law doesn't currently allow authorities to enforce cooperation with the requests, although the government is planning legislation permitting fines for businesses that don't comply. For now, subsidies will be offered to businesses that close early, and the government could name and shame those that fail to do so. Among major steps authorized to be taken by Tokyo and neighboring prefectures are asking restaurants, bars, and karaoke venues to close by 8 p.m. and requesting establishments to cease serving alcohol at 7 p.m. through February 7.
Meanwhile, China has sealed off 2 cities south of Beijing, cutting transport links and banning millions of residents from leaving as authorities move to stem the country's largest COVID-19 outbreak in 6 months. Hebei province in northern China has seen 127 new COVID-19 cases, plus an additional 183 asymptomatic infections in the past week. The vast majority were found in Shijiazhuang, a city of several million in Hebei province, whose surrounding areas take the total population to 11 million. 9 confirmed cases were in the neighboring city of Xingtai, whose area covers 7 million people. Residents of Shijiazhuang and Xingtai were banned from leaving the cities unless absolutely necessary, Hebei authorities announced Friday. Officials vowed to strictly control the movement of people and vehicles, with all residential estates placed under closed management, a euphemism for lockdown. The residents were also banned from entering Beijing or leaving the province unless absolutely necessary. People in 4 Hebei cities and 15 counties surrounding Beijing must produce a negative nucleic acid test result taken within 72 hours to enter the capital, as well as proof of a Beijing address or workplace, according to officials.
Meanwhile, European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said the EU has struck a deal to double its supply of the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine against COVID-19 to a total of 600 million doses. Let's listen in.
We have already a contract, so no lengthy negotiations anymore. It is a proven vaccine, so the whole procedure of authorization is done. The member states know it, so they know how to handle it, they know the logistics behind it, and therefore this brings certainty for the planning, and it creates an additional momentum for vaccination throughout Europe and for the neighborhood. Good news, on Wednesday the Commission granted market authorization for a second vaccine, it's Moderna. This means with these 2 authorized vaccines, we have already secured an amount of doses that we need to vaccinate 380 million Europeans. And this is more than 80% of the European population. And legally binding. We have all agreed legally binding that
Now, the European Commission has been hit with rising criticism that the vaccine rollout that started December 27 has been too slow compared to countries such as the U.S. or former EU member Britain. But von der Leyen insisted the Commission had taken the right course of action. She said global competition for promising vaccines was fierce when it started negotiations early last year on behalf of the EU's 27 member states. The European Commission now has contracts for a 2.3 billion doses of various vaccines, enough for the entire 450 million EU population on the basis of a 2-dose regimen per person, plus extra for poorer neighboring countries.
We have an update on what's happening in the UK regarding their coronavirus cases. We have Janelle Kasuga. Janelle.
On Wednesday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that coronavirus marathon had turned into a hopeful sprint to vaccinate millions in the weeks ahead, but announced yet another nationwide lockdown that may last until at least mid-February. Let's listen in.
Today, the United Kingdom's chief medical officers have advised that the country should move to alert level 5, meaning that if action is not taken, NHS capacity may be overwhelmed within 21 days. If our understanding of the virus doesn't change dramatically once again, if the rollout of the vaccine programme continues to be successful, if deaths start to fall as the vaccine takes effect, and critically, if everyone plays their part by following the rules, then I hope we can steadily move out of lockdown, reopening schools after the February half-term and starting cautiously to move regions down the tiers. But now, more than ever, we must pull together. You should follow the new rules from now, and they will become law in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Parliament will meet largely remotely later that day. I know that the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland share my conviction that this is a pivotal moment, and they're taking similar steps.
On Wednesday, members of Parliament were hastily recalled and voted 524 to 16 in favour of the lockdown measures, which came into effect in England overnight. Similarly, Scotland's lockdown will last at least until the end of this month, whilst Wales and Northern Ireland have also toughened existing restrictions. Britain is one of the worst hit countries, with nearly 2.8 million cases and more than 76,000 deaths in total. With a new strain of the virus spreading with frightening ease and speed, which emerged in southeast England last month, those numbers continue to soar. This week on Tuesday, another 830 deaths were recorded, and on Wednesday there was a further 1,041 fatalities from the coronavirus, the first time the daily death toll has topped 1,000 since April and the onset of the pandemic. This new figure means 77,346 people have now died in the UK within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test, one of the highest in Europe alongside Italy. Official data show that 1 in 50 people in England were infected last week, rising to 1 in 30 in London, and many hospitals say they are swamped with COVID-19 patients. On the other hand, Britain was the first country to start rolling out vaccines last month, with the Pfizer-BioNTech shot, and this week began injections of the homegrown jab developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca. So far, over 1.3 million people have received a first dose of one or the other vaccine across the United Kingdom, and the government is delaying follow-up doses in order to spread as much protection around the population as possible. Boris Johnson told MPs the lockdown would stay in legal force until March 31st, but would be reviewed in mid-February. By then, the government plans to have given a first vaccine dose to about 14 million people, including everyone over 80, care home residents, and all frontline medics in the National Health Service. The lockdown restrictions are even stricter, with the public being ordered to stay at home and work remotely if possible, no household mixing, and to only go out for essential shopping, for medical reasons, or to exercise. However, unlike the first lockdown last spring, elite sports, including Premier League football, will continue. The first time round, Britain kept its borders open to international travel, but the government said it was now reviewing whether to take action on inbound flights after new mutant strains emerged in South Africa and Denmark. Johnson added that any easing of the lockdown would be gradual, and the local elections due in May were under review after they were postponed once already last year.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Janelle, for that report. Please do stay safe out there and keep us posted on what's happening there in the UK.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Janelle Kasuga. We live in interesting times.
To Australia now, where the city of Brisbane has called a snap 3-day lockdown after a worker at a quarantine hotel contracted the highly infectious UK strain of COVID-19. Let's listen in.
That this UK strain is highly infectious. It is 70% more infectious, and we are going to go hard and we are going to go early to do everything we can to stop the spread of this virus. It is incredibly contagious. I have been briefed. Greater Brisbane will be entering a 3-day lockdown. That will be Metro North, Metro South, Westmoreland. So let me go through the council areas to make it very clear for everybody. The areas that will be declared Greater Brisbane will be the council areas of Brisbane, Logan, Ipswich, Moreton and Redlands. From 6 p.m. tonight, Friday, to 6 p.m. Monday, all residents living in those areas will be required to stay at home. Think of it as a long weekend at home. We need to do this. I've accepted the strong advice from Dr. Young. If we do not do this now, it could end up being a 30-day lockdown.
In other news, Sweden's parliament on Friday passed a pandemic law giving the government new powers to curb the spread of COVID-19 in a country that has controversially relied on mostly non-coercive measures up to now. The new law, which comes into force on Sunday, will enable the government to close businesses, shopping malls or public transport. It will also be able to impose limits on the number of people allowed in specific public places, rather than general restrictions on public gatherings. Asked why the law was only put forward 10 months after the start of the epidemic, Health Minister Lena Hallengren said it was not something we saw the need for in the spring. Speaking to broadcaster SVT, Hallengren stressed that they had seen an effect from widespread changes in behavior among Swedes. In most cases, breaches of the new restrictions will lead to a fine, which previously has not been possible. Unlike many other countries, Sweden does not have legislation that allows the government to shut down society in peacetime. Sweden has made headlines around the world by never imposing the type of lockdown seen elsewhere in Europe, but it has started tightening measures as in the face of a stronger than expected second wave over recent months.
The intensive care unit at the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital in one of Los Angeles' poorest districts is well accustomed to death. But with the city now at the heart of the U.S. COVID-19 pandemic, medics say they have never seen anything on this scale. Take a look.
Yes. No, if it's all the result, that's fine.
So if Los Angeles is the epicenter of the world, this community is the epicenter of COVID in Los Angeles. This is a low-income minority community. It is almost all Latino and African American. This is where the essential workers live. These are the people who are stocking the grocery stores, driving the buses, cleaning up after the rest of us.
Yeah, I'll get you another one.
You know, we see the suffering that the pandemic is bringing every day, and we're working as hard as we can to support people who are being impacted.
I feel like I'm protecting not only myself, but also my family members, and, you know, working in healthcare, we got to make sure we look out for the community that we serve.
These 12-hour shifts, these co-workers, this environment gives me the drive and the energy to fight another day.
"2020 has tied 2016 as the hottest year on record," the European Union's Climate Monitoring Service said Friday, keeping Earth on a global warming fast track that could devastate large swathes of humanity. The 6 years since 2015 are the 6th warmest ever. Industrial levels was all the more alarming because it came without the help of a periodic natural weather event known as an El Niño, which added up to 0.2 of a degree to the 2016 average, according to NASA and Britain's Met Office. It is quite clear
heavy snow was falling across parts of Spain on Thursday, which could cover up to half of the country in the coming days, according to forecasters. Now, if the forecasts are confirmed, we could be facing one of the most extensive snowfalls in recent years. That is according to Ruben Del Campo, spokesman for Spain's AMET weather agency. By Thursday afternoon, the capital was blanketed in white, as was the vast central region of Castilla-La Mancha, with a rare snowfall brought by Storm Filomena. Take a look. Now, more than half of the country is on alert for snowfall, which is expected to last until Sunday and mainly affect the central, northern, and eastern regions. By Thursday afternoon, traffic had been disrupted by the snow on nearly 200 roads, and some trains were also delayed, according to officials. So low were temperatures in Madrid that the ducks in the city's Retiro Park could be seen waddling across the frozen boating lake. Elsewhere, an official record of minus 34.1 degrees Celsius was even recorded at the Clot de la Llanca ski station in the central Pyrenees on Wednesday.
At least 6 people have died and nearly 50,000 evacuated in Malaysia after monsoon rains pounded the country's east coast, authorities said Friday, causing what residents described as the worst flooding in half a century. Authorities have stepped up rescue operations after locals complained they had to fend for themselves earlier this week. Heavy rains continued to batter the region on Friday, swelling the number of people abandoning their homes to more than 47,000, according to officials. Floods hit the region during the rainy season every year and regularly result in mass evacuations, but those in the affected areas say this year's are the worst in decades. Many roads, including the main expressway that links the East Coast states, have been closed. The worst hit state is Pahang, where around 27,000 people have been evacuated in recent days, according to the Social Welfare Department. In one village in the state cut off by floods, residents were evacuated in an excavator on Wednesday, while others were forced to swim through deep waters.
Elon Musk, the outspoken and envelope-pushing founder and CEO of Tesla, overtook Amazon boss Jeff Bezos to become the world's wealthiest person, according to U.S. media on Thursday. Now, Musk is a major shareholder of the electric car company and has benefited from Tesla's surging share price over the last year. CNBC estimated his wealth at $185 billion. The distinction is the latest superlative for the South African-born Musk, who also leads the aerospace venture SpaceX. Tesla is widely seen as a pace-setter for the car industry as conventional automakers try to catch up in electric autos. Tesla had a strong 2020 as it ramped up production, broke ground on new factories, and reported a series of profitable quarters and was added to the prestigious S&P 500 index. Now that enabled shares to rise more than 700% during the year, making it more valuable than the world's top car makers combined.
Vietnam's trade ministry said U.S. probe into Vietnam's currency and timber could harm bilateral relations and negatively impact workers and consumers in both countries, according to a Reuters report. The U.S. Treasury earlier accused the communist state of intervening in currency markets to weaken the dong, which the IMF said was undervalued by some 8.4% in 2018. The Trump administration in late December named Vietnam a currency manipulator, a move that businesses said could see the USTR impose tariffs on Vietnamese goods. It has also accused Vietnam of avoiding tariffs by mislabeling products made from Chinese timber. Vietnam's trade ministry said this investigation could cause many undesirable effects, damage bilateral relations, and have negative impacts on thousands of businesses and millions of workers and consumers in Vietnam and the United States.
And the price of the cryptocurrency Bitcoin soared past $40,000 for the first time on Thursday, rising $10,000 in just 5 days. The price of Bitcoin was $40,000, $40,380 at roughly 1820 GMT, having jumped 10.4% during the trading session. It later lost some ground and FactSet data valued at $38,950, up 6.52% on the day at 1850 GMT. The cryptocurrency, which has known wild swings in value, passed $30,000 for the first time just on Saturday. Investors continue to hop on the cryptocurrency train, which appears to be gaining more interest now that the U.S. economy is poised to deliver more stimulus in Biden's first 100 days, according to market analyst Edward Moya at currency trading platform Owanda. But its latest meteoric rise is already fueling talk of a new correction. Fellow Owanda analyst Craig Erlam warned that even if a correction does not seem imminent, once one emerges, it is going to hurt. And one European analyst who wished to remain anonymous told AFP that it's starting to get worrying. It's no longer at all the market of a few weeks back. A correction is inevitable. Others at Societe Generale said if a large fall does materialize, people will likely look back at Bitcoin's pandemic bubble. Just 12 years old, Bitcoin has seen a meteoric rise since March when it stood at $5,000, spurred by online payments, giant PayPal saying it would enable account holders to use cryptocurrency. After PayPal's announcement in October, analysts at investment banking giant JP Morgan Chase compared the cryptocurrency to gold, and this week predicted the unit could rise up to $146,000, if not higher.
Augmented reality reveals sculptures invisible to the naked eye in a curious art show installed on the banks of London's Thames River. Scan a QR code plastered to several red life buoys with a phone or a tablet to download an app that will make giant, colorful digital sculptures, some of them hovering over or above the river, come to life on the screen. With museums closed across the United Kingdom because of the coronavirus restrictions, the exhibition called Unreal City provides a safe, dematerialized way of enjoying art in the public sphere. Watch this.
Absurd situations. So it's quite a large intervention in the city.
During a period when all museums in the UK, for instance, are closed, we actually staged a massive artwork in the art show rather in the public sphere, and it shows at least the potential. It's the first. We know that this there are challenges, there are limitations, but it does work, and we have reached thousands of people already with this strange new art form, a dematerialized art form, weightless sculptures hovering in the air above the river.
This is quite interesting also because some of the elements on the table are quite interesting.
intervention in the city.
All right.
Well, that was really cute. I wish we can have more of that.
Yes.
And maybe here in the
Maybe here in the
as well.
Philippines,
Yeah,
yeah.
I miss going to museums. Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow.
And before we go, I would like to greet the mother of our EBC correspondent, Echo Hortaleza. Her mother is Laureen Quinola. Hello po, and happy birthday po sa inyo. Even if it's a belated happy birthday, I hope you had a fun day on your birthday, a blessed day. And we hope to see you soon in the Philippines as soon as the pandemic is over.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday po. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. As I always say, there's always something to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.